The morning of December 25th, 1988, began like any other Christmas in the small town of Willow Creek, Pennsylvania. Snow blanketed the streets and rooftops, glittering in the weak morning sun, and the smell of fresh pine and cinnamon drifted from homes filled with holiday cheer. Families gathered around sparkling trees, tearing open wrapping paper and laughing over steaming mugs of cocoa. Outside, children skated on frozen ponds and built snowmen, their rosy cheeks glowing in the crisp winter air. But just a few blocks away, at the old St. Augustine Church, a sense of unease seemed to hover in the stillness, unnoticed by most. Inside the church, the atmosphere was festive, yet strangely solemn. The choir had gathered for the 10 a.m. Christmas service, their voices trembling slightly in the cold air as they practiced the final carols. Candles flickered along the pews, casting shadows that danced across the worn wooden floors. Parents adjusted their scarves and whispered last-minute reminders to their children, urging them to be on their best behavior. Among them were Emma, Jacob, and little Lucy, three bright-eyed siblings dressed in their holiday finest, clutching new toys and holding hands tightly as they followed their mother down the aisle. No one could have guessed that by the end of this morning, those children would vanish without a trace. The service began as usual, with organ music echoing through the high, vaulted ceilings. Outside, the snow continued to fall silently, muffling any sound that might have traveled from the street. Inside, the children sat near the front, wide-eyed as the choir's voices swelled. At first, everything seemed perfectly ordinary, candles flickering, hymns filling the room, and families exchanging smiles. But then, a faint draft swept through the church, extinguishing a few of the candles. The air suddenly felt heavier, almost cold enough to make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Some of the parents noticed it and exchanged uneasy glances, though no one spoke aloud. Minutes passed, and the choir began the last verse of Silent Night. The children, entranced by the singing, seemed to lean in closer to one another, swaying to the rhythm. Suddenly, the church doors, which had been closed and locked before the service, creaked ever so slightly, as if pushed by an invisible hand. The parents in the pews glanced nervously, hearts thudding, but before anyone could react, Emma, Jacob, and Lucy were gone. 1 second they were there, holding hands and smiling at the choir, and the next, nothing. The pew where they had been sitting appeared empty, as though they had evaporated into thin air. Chaos erupted instantly. Mothers and fathers scrambled to the altar, calling out their children's names over the echoing organ. The choir stopped mid-note, eyes wide in shock, as the sudden silence pressed down on the church like a heavy fog. People rushed to the doors and windows, testing locks and shaking handles, but the church seemed to have swallowed the children whole. Not a sound came from outside, not a footprint in the fresh snow. It was as if the world itself had conspired to erase Emma, Jacob, and Lucy from existence. In that moment, every person in the church realized something terrifying. The children were gone, and no one had seen even the slightest hint of how it had happened. After the disappearance of Emma, Jacob, and Lucy, Willow Creek was never the same. The small town, usually bustling with holiday cheer and neighborly gatherings, fell into an uneasy silence. Parents whispered warnings to their children, urging them to stay away from the old St. Augustine Church, even for innocent reasons. The once-loved landmark became a shadow of dread in the town's memory, a place people avoided like an unspoken curse. Even adults would cross the street rather than walk past its tall, frost-covered doors, and on snowy nights, rumors swirled of strange noises echoing from inside the abandoned building. Stories about the church's dark past began to circulate, fueled by imagination and fear. Some claimed the building had always been touched by something sinister, pointing to its cracked stained-glass windows and the way the wind moaned through the broken steeple. Others swore they'd seen fleeting shadows in the church's empty windows or heard ghostly laughter echoing down the streets at odd hours. Children dared each other to peek through the boarded-up doors, but no one ever stayed long enough to confirm the tales. The disappearance of the three children only made these stories feel more real, as though the church itself had claimed them to punish the town. As weeks turned into months, the townspeople's fear deepened into a kind of collective paranoia. Every Christmas, families remembered the missing children with a mixture of sorrow and unease. The holiday that once brought joy now brought whispers and nervous glances toward the church. Some locals swore they saw figures moving inside on snowy nights, tiny shadows that reminded them eerily of the lost children. Others claimed they heard the soft strains of carols drifting through the air, even though no one had been inside for decades. The old church had become a symbol of a mystery no one dared solve. The police presence dwindled after the initial investigation yielded nothing. Officers were polite but firm in telling residents there was no evidence to support the growing legends of hauntings or supernatural involvement. Yet, no official explanation could erase the fear. Parents forbade their children from wandering near the churchyard, and the building's caretakers quietly abandoned it, claiming it was too cold, too drafty, and best left alone. Rumors grew like wildfire, some suggesting that the children had been hidden within secret passages in the church, while others whispered of cults and rituals tied to the town's earliest settlers. Each story was more horrifying than the last, and every whispered retelling made the church seem alive with secrets. Even the town's children felt the weight of the mystery. Sleepovers turned into tense nights of telling scary stories about the church, and dares to peek inside often ended in frantic retreats. Emma, Jacob, and Lucy became figures of legend, their faces appearing in faded photographs in the library or local newspaper archives, forever frozen in time. Teachers quietly warned students not to talk about the church too much, worried about stirring unnecessary fear. In Willow Creek, the church was no longer a place of worship. It was a warning, a ghostly reminder that some mysteries were better left unsolved, a place where fear had taken permanent residence in the hearts of everyone who lived near it. The morning after the children disappeared, the town was thrown into chaos. Police cars lined the streets outside St. Augustine Church, their red and blue lights flashing against the white snow. Officers hurriedly questioned parents, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen something unusual. But every story sounded the same: nothing. Witnesses reported seeing the children enter the church that morning, smiling and excited, and then nothing. The authorities combed the building from top to bottom, checking every pew, closet, and crawl space, yet it yielded no clues. The church was silent, almost mocking in its emptiness, as if it had swallowed the children whole and refused to speak. Detectives expanded their search to the surrounding neighborhood. Every inch of the nearby streets, alleys, and forests was scoured with flashlights and tracking dogs. Snowy footprints that might have belonged to the children were found, but each trail mysteriously ended near the church's steps. No tire tracks indicated an abduction, and no signs of struggle were visible anywhere. Even the dogs seemed hesitant, barking at empty air as if sensing something unseen. Weeks passed, and the investigation became a desperate scramble for answers, each lead more confusing and dead-end than the last. The local press quickly seized the story, turning the vanished children into a statewide headline. Journalists swarmed the town, hoping to uncover something the police had missed. They interviewed parents, parishioners, and former church staff, piecing together fragments of information. Every article hinted at the same chilling idea. Something inexplicable had happened at St. Augustine, something beyond logic. Townspeople, once friendly with outsiders, became wary of reporters, reluctant to stir up old fear. The mystery was growing larger than the police files, spreading through every living room and diner in Willow Creek like a cold shadow. Authorities even called in state investigators and forensic experts, but the church offered no help. Its walls were intact, the doors locked from the inside, and no hidden passages were found. Experts examined the floors, the altar, and even the steeple, trying to detect any signs of tampering, but every test came back clean. It was as if the building itself conspired to erase all evidence, leaving only the gaping holes in the lives of 3 families. Every day without new leads tightened the grip of fear and hopelessness on the town, creating whispers of curses, ghosts, and darker forces at play. Months turned into years, and the case began to fade from the public eye, but the police never truly closed it. Officers would occasionally revisit old notes, hoping new technology or witness recollections might unlock the secret. But every time they returned, the same unsettling emptiness greeted them. The building stood like a sentinel over the unsolved mystery, a constant reminder that the children's fate was as unreachable as the snowy peaks in the distance. In Willow Creek, St. Augustine Church became a place that carried not only the weight of vanished innocence but also the cruel frustration of a town unable to uncover the truth. Decades passed, and the old St. Augustine Church fell further into disrepair. Its once bright steeple became weathered and grey, the stained glass windows cracked and clouded with grime. Snow drifted across the worn roof each winter, untouched by human hands, and the heavy wooden doors were boarded up, groaning in the wind like a voice long silenced. Townspeople who had once filled the pews avoided the building entirely. Children grew up hearing stories of Emma, Jacob, and Lucy, their disappearances whispered as warnings to behave and to never go near the church after dark. The memory of that Christmas morning hung over Willow Creek like a shadow that refused to lift. The silence surrounding the church was more than just physical. It was a town-wide, almost supernatural stillness. Families hesitated to mention the church in conversation, fearing that speaking its name aloud might stir something that had been lying dormant for years. On snowy nights, locals reported hearing faint footsteps on the roof or the echo of laughter in empty corridors, sounds that seemed to belong neither to the living nor to the world outside. Even those who passed by in daylight felt the unease settle in their chest, a cold weight that made their steps quicker and their hearts pound. The church was no longer just abandoned. It was a presence, a lingering reminder of what had been lost. New generations of children grew up with the tale as a cautionary legend. Every December, teachers would quietly recount the story of the missing children, and parents would use it to instill obedience, telling their kids that St. Augustine was a place to avoid. On the rare occasion that someone tried to explore the building, neighborhood dogs barked furiously, and shadows seemed to flicker in the windows. Photographs of the church, taken by curious teenagers, often came out mysteriously blurred, as if the building itself resisted being captured on film. The town treated it as cursed ground, a place where even time seemed to hold its breath. Meanwhile, the families of the missing children endured their own private torment. Every Christmas, they would gather around empty chairs and place small stockings in remembrance. Emma, Jacob, and Lucy became names etched in memory rather than flesh and blood, haunting the holidays and the quiet streets of Willow Creek. The local police occasionally received tips, an old hiker claiming to see small footprints near the frozen creek, a trucker remembering a child hitching a ride decades ago, but every lead ended in frustration. The mystery remained airtight, and each year without answers only deepened the collective fear and sorrow. By the turn of the century, St. Augustine Church had become a symbol not just of loss, but of the town's inability to confront the unknown. Even professional ghost hunters and paranormal investigators who ventured inside left shaken and unnerved, claiming that the air felt wrong, as though the building itself was aware of their presence. The townspeople whispered that the church had been waiting, patient and silent, for the right moment to reveal its secrets. For 35 long years, the children's fate remained buried beneath layers of dust, shadow, and unanswered questions, while the church loomed over Willow Creek like a sleeping predator, its history of terror preserved in every cracked brick and creaking floorboard. It was early 2023 when St. Augustine Church, long abandoned and feared by the townspeople, finally caught the attention of a construction crew. Hired to renovate the building into a community center, the workers approached with caution, aware of the decades-old rumors surrounding the site. As they entered, the air inside was thick with dust and the faint scent of mildew, carrying a chill that seemed to seep into their bones. Each step echoed loudly against the empty walls, making the silence almost unbearable. The crew joked nervously about ghosts and hidden treasures, but no one could shake the feeling that they weren't supposed to be there. As the team began to remove old wooden floorboards from the altar area, one worker's crowbar struck something unusually solid. Curiosity mixed with unease as they pried the boards away, revealing the edge of a trapdoor, perfectly hidden beneath layers of grime and age. The discovery caused a ripple of tension to spread through the crew. This was no ordinary renovation. Flashlights danced over the dusty surface as they slowly lifted the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The air that escaped from below smelled stale and ancient, like it had been sealed for decades. The descent into the hidden basement felt surreal. The narrow passageway was lined with cobwebs and thick layers of dust, untouched for 35 years. The workers moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, revealing the crumbling walls and low ceiling. Each step was met with a creak, echoing like a warning. It was the kind of place that made a person's stomach churn, the kind of darkness that seemed alive. As they reached the bottom, the floor opened into a small, windowless room that had clearly been used to store something long forgotten. But what? They could not yet tell. Inside the secret chamber, the workers were met with a scene that made their hearts pound and their skin crawl. Scattered across the floor were children's belongings, preserved eerily in the dust, tiny shoes, woolen coats, toys, and even partially faded holiday decorations. It was immediately apparent that these items had belonged to Emma, Jacob, and Lucy, the 3 children who had vanished on Christmas morning decades ago. Each object told a silent story of innocence lost, of lives interrupted in the most terrifying way. The weight of the discovery pressed down on the crew, making the walls feel tighter, the air heavier. But the room offered more than just possessions. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, dark, curling markings that seemed to hum in the flashlight's glow. In one corner lay old journals, yellowed with age, written in meticulous handwriting that belonged to a former priest of the church. The pages hinted at a chilling secret, revealing a twisted belief that the children were being protected in a hidden space, a rationale steeped in old religious rituals gone horribly wrong. Every word in the journals deepened the horror, confirming that this was no accident or natural disappearance. For the first time in 35 years, the town's most terrifying mystery was no longer just a story. It was a living, breathing reality waiting to be confronted. As the workers sifted through the hidden room, they began piecing together the terrifying story that had been buried for 35 years. The journals they found belonged to Father Thomas Whitaker, a priest who had served St. Augustine Church at the time of the children's disappearance. His meticulous handwriting documented every detail of the children's abduction, revealing a chilling belief that he was protecting them from an evil he claimed lurked in the world outside the church. The words were calm and deliberate, but the meaning was monstrous. This man had kidnapped the children under the guise of divine duty, hiding them away in a secret chamber beneath the altar. The room itself seemed to mirror Father Whitaker's twisted logic. In one corner, small beds had been constructed from old crates and planks, covered with threadbare blankets that had long since decayed. Scattered toys and shoes indicated that the children had been alive for at least some time, though the journals hinted at increasingly strict confinement over the weeks and months. The priest wrote of rituals and prayers he believed would shield them from worldly corruption, his devotion growing darker with each page. The words painted a horrifying picture. This was not a simple disappearance, but a deliberate, calculated captivity that had been hidden in plain sight within the walls of the very church the town had trusted. Even more unsettling were the symbols etched into the walls. The journals explained them as protective sigils, meant to guard the children from evil spirits and sinful influence. Yet, instead of safety, the markings carried an oppressive energy that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Workers reported a sudden drop in temperature as they examined the etchings, and one described a feeling of being watched, as though the room itself remembered the horrors committed within it. The combination of Father Whitaker's meticulous record-keeping and the ominous symbols made it clear that the church had been a carefully constructed trap, a place designed to conceal a crime that defied comprehension. The deeper the crew delved into the journals, the more disturbing the entries became. Father Whitaker wrote about his interactions with the children, detailing their routines and even the conversations he forced them to have, always under the guise of spiritual guidance. He believed himself to be a righteous guardian, yet his words betrayed a mind twisted by obsession. The journals also hinted at attempts to involve other members of the church, cryptically suggesting that some parishioners knew too much and were kept at a distance. The level of premeditation and secrecy was staggering. This was not a moment of madness, but decades of careful manipulation hidden beneath layers of faith and ritual. As the workers absorbed the magnitude of what they had uncovered, the chilling truth became undeniable. The children's disappearance was orchestrated from the inside. The church, long feared and avoided by the townspeople, had not been haunted by ghosts or curses. It had been haunted by the actions of a man who had perverted his faith into a means of control and imprisonment. The discovery sent shivers through the crew, as each object, each journal entry, confirmed the horrifying reality. What had once been a story of vanishing innocence was now a tangible, horrifying legacy of deceit, obsession, and darkness, waiting silently for the world above to finally see it. News of the discovery spread like wildfire through Willow Creek, sending shockwaves through a town that had lived in uneasy silence for decades. Families of Emma, Jacob, and Lucy were finally able to confirm the terrible truth. They were gone, and the church held the long-buried evidence of their abduction. The revelation reopened old wounds, turning the quiet streets of the town into corridors of whispered horror and disbelief. Local authorities worked to document the hidden chamber, collecting every object and preserving the journals, but no amount of investigation could erase the weight of what had been uncovered. It was a darkness that could not simply be locked away again. Even after the authorities stepped in, a palpable fear lingered in the town. The church itself, once silent and foreboding, seemed to hum with a life of its own. Locals reported seeing shadows moving behind the boarded-up windows, and at night, faint cries could be heard on the cold winter wind. Some claimed the air around the church carried a strange chill, as if the building itself remembered the horrors it had contained. Children avoided the streets nearby, and even the bravest adults admitted to feeling watched, their footsteps quickening as they passed. The mystery, though uncovered, had left behind a haunting presence that refused to fade. The journals and belongings recovered from the hidden room revealed the twisted depth of Father Whitaker's mind, but they also hinted at unanswered questions. Were there other secret spaces in the church, hidden even more thoroughly than the one they found? Did anyone else in the town know or participate in his dark schemes? Investigators and historians alike speculated, but many answers remained elusive. Every attempt to piece together the priest's network or intentions uncovered only more shadows, fragments of a life that had collided with innocence and left a lasting scar on the town. Despite the horror, some residents found a measure of closure in finally knowing what had happened to the children. Memorials were held, photographs displayed, and a renewed sense of remembrance spread through the community. Yet, even in these moments of solemn reflection, the church remained an ominous figure in the background. People spoke of glimpsing small figures near the windows, of fleeting movements that vanished the moment someone approached. The children's spirits, or at least the echoes of their presence, seemed to linger, as if refusing to leave the place that had defined their fate. Years after the discovery, the story of St. Augustine Church and the vanished children became part of Willow Creek's identity, a dark legend passed from one generation to the next. The building itself, partially restored yet still marked by age and secrecy, stood as a chilling monument to what had occurred. Even those who had never lived through the original disappearance felt the weight of its history. Every Christmas, the memory of Emma, Jacob, and Lucy returned to the forefront, a reminder that some mysteries, though uncovered, leave behind more than answers. They leave behind a haunting, a presence that refuses to be forgotten. As the years pass, St. Augustine Church still stands, silent yet watching, its walls heavy with memories no one can forget. The vanished children may finally be remembered, their story uncovered, but the darkness that hid them for 35 years hasn't completely left. Locals still whisper of shadows behind the windows and footsteps echoing in empty halls. Some say, on cold winter nights, you can hear faint laughter drifting through the air, a reminder that the past never truly disappears. The church may no longer hold secrets of what happened inside, but it holds a warning. Some places, some mysteries, are never meant to be forgotten, and some darkness refuses to stay buried.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.